Greetings, everyone. We hope you are having a fabulous day. This is Richard Harris with my friend Scott Leese on the Surface Sales Podcast, brought to you by Lead 411, Find Them, Perception Predict, Vidyard, and Gong, our five favorite sponsors. We really appreciate their support. And we are super excited here to be joined by, is it the Director of Sales? Let me make sure I get this right. So the Senior Director of Global Sales at Seismic, DeJuan Brown. So DeJuan, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you being here this week.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to give people some perspective, right? Currently it's Seismic, right? What kind of deals are you guys doing? Like, what's your sales cycle? What's your average contract value? I just want to give people the understanding of where your frame of reference comes from as we talk about things today.
Yeah, I mean, right now I am, as you mentioned, the Senior Director of Global Sales. So I'm dealing with very large enterprises, sales cycles, anywhere from 9 to 18 months probably. I just got here on this side of the table probably 3 months ago, almost 3 months ago.
What do you mean this side of the table? What does that mean?
Well, I was at Seismic before, so I think it was probably a year or just a little bit over a year ago. I was at Seismic as a Senior Director Enterprise, and then moved away, and then I came back just in September as Senior Director of Global Sales. So it's a slightly different sales cycle. I'm imagining a little bit longer, a little bit larger in terms of the companies that I'm dealing with. But yeah, so that's what I meant by this side of the table. Instead of enterprise, is global.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So,
yeah,
I think this happens to a lot of people where, you got a good job, you like it, everything's going well, and then for some reason you leave, and then you come back. So I'm curious, what made you want to leave at that point, or was it sort of a mutual separation?
No, it was really an opportunity that I, at the time, felt like I couldn't pass up. It was an opportunity to go to a small startup and lead and sort of launch a sales organization within that startup as a VP of sales. Very amicable leaving situation. It wasn't like I was forced out or I felt like I needed to leave because of anything that was happening at Seismic. Seismic's a phenomenal company, as is, I guess, evidenced by my boomerang, right? So
but I want to dig into that, right? Because I think this happened to me before too. You're at this great company, things are going well, and then the startup thing sort of tugs at you. What were the things that made you want to leave specifically, aside from, hey, it was a great opportunity?
Yeah, I think locally for me, so I'm in Richmond, Virginia. The startup is based in Richmond, Virginia. Several of the founders of that startup are friends of mine. So there's a personal relationship. I was an advisor. I'm still, on the advisory board of that startup, 10 months prior to joining them as the VP of sales. And so like that, just the intimacy that I had with the product, with the market that they were going after, and with the team itself, were things that really drew me to the opportunity. And so, it was, most of it was relational. Relational in nature. It wasn't necessarily something where it was just like they've made me an offer I couldn't refuse type of scenario. It was just really wanting to work and help.
That was my question though. Were they throwing any level of ownership or options at you, or was it, hey, you know what? Now I get to go build this on my own from scratch, so I want to put that into my repertoire. Like, what were some of those other things?
Yeah, again, outside of the relational aspect of things, it was obviously some incentive, right? Some of it was, a thought that I could actually take some of the things that I had learned and some of the skill set and talents that I had and actually focus almost 100% on executing against those things. And that was really attractive. The company, again, being in Richmond, Virginia, was super attractive because a lot of people don't recognize or know that there's even a startup community in Richmond, Virginia, right? Like, who knew? Right. And not only was it, that company, but there's probably 100 others that are here in Richmond, Virginia, and just kind of building relationships within that ecosystem was important to me too, because I live here and I work here and I play here. And so just being associated that closely with a company that was trying to put, to some degree, Richmond on the map, not that it was the first startup to blow or to do really well, but just being a part of that felt like something I wanted to be a part of, especially in light of the fact that I would be able to, in that position, make some, have an impact on like the talent that was being brought in,
Right.
right? And I'm deeply interested and concerned with seeing representation from minorities in this space, and to know that I was going to have some level of impact and ability to shape that from scratch in an organization really excited me, because I knew the type of opportunities I've been given to be in a position to actually give those opportunities and pay that forward was
Yep.
something that really attracted me as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to that immediately, but I wanted to ask
Yeah,
the obvious question around the
yeah,
boomerang. So what made you
yeah,
come
yeah.
back?
Yeah, I mean, listen, before I left Seismic, I felt like Seismic had the types of things that I thought, hey, this is what I want to implement in an organization that I start and kind of spearhead, right? Almost all of what was coming to my mind, almost all of the ideas that came to my mind came from my time at Seismic,
Hmm.
right? So when you think about like, okay, here I am in a position to sort of build a sales organization from scratch,
Hmm.
and I'm leaning heavily on I mean, it wasn't even that long of an experience at Seismic. I was there probably 9 or 10 months initially, but here I am leaning on all that I learned in that 9 or 10 month period and feeling like these are literal best practices to bring into this new space that I'm entering into.
Hmm.
That's a clue, right? Right. For me, that was a clue that's like, oh my goodness, I feel like the way that the sales organization has been structured and the way things operate and the enablement piece that's in Seismic, are they should be replicated. And so I was trying to replicate that. And then when it was time for me to move back into just an advisor role for that particular company, like I didn't feel like there was I didn't have a whole bunch of companies that were coming to mind as places I
Right.
wanted to land. And Seismic obviously was one of those. So
Got it. Got it. So let's go in and talk about, sort of this paying it forward piece, right? And
yeah,
representing minorities. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, so I have a certain understanding of the South.
yeah,
Left for one of the main reasons was I just didn't like that level of discrimination.
yeah,
And granted, that was 30 something years ago. So I think Atlanta's and Georgia as a whole, we know, are making some changes.
yeah.
Um, but let's talk about that like early on in your career, right? You decide what made you even want to be in sales in the first place. And then I want to understand like what challenges do you felt like you had to face?
Yeah, I wasn't sales wasn't on my radar. Like I didn't. There was no point in time where I was like I wanted to be in sales, right? So like I
Mhm.
was waiting tables um, for 7, 8 years, bartending, waiting tables, and honestly, I love the lifestyle. But in the midst of that, I kind of cut my teeth as a I guess a communicator, right? Because you're dealing with every type of personality under the sun in these various restaurants that I worked in, and I think I just got good at it, and I
So
had
how'd you get
a few.
sucked in? Like, did somebody? I used to recruit out
Yeah,
of bars and restaurants. I used to recruit waiters and waitresses for the
yeah,
very reason
smart
you're
man.
talking about, right?
Smart
Uh,
man. Yeah. Yeah.
so, how
So
did you even get into sales? What got it on your radar?
yeah, I had a buddy who we had a lot of fun together, like as friends outside of any work space, but he worked at Intuit, right? The Intuit, right? So he
Hmm.
worked there as a web guy, and he was like, man, listen, man, you got to. From his perspective, he was like, this is in 2002. He was like, you have the gift of gab, man. Like you need to get into like some real sales because you're persuasive. Like the things that you like, everyone around you ends up liking. He's like, that's essentially sales. Like you need to come over here. And I was like, man, first of all, I'm not a salesman. Second of all, they're not going to hire me, right? And he said, man, just put the application in, and I'll put a word in. And I was like, all right, I
So
put the
let's stop right there.
yeah,
Was
yeah,
it they? Was it that they? And I'm going to just go to the obvious. Was
right.
it that you didn't think they'd hire you because you had no experience, or do you think it was because you're a black man?
No, it's a combination. So this was a black man who was telling me to do this. But the combination was like, I had a particular lifestyle in 2002 um, that didn't really accord with the corporate world. And then also, I had no experience in anything corporate up to that point, right? Like, I mean, real corporate. When I thought about what it might look like to work at a place like Intuit, first of all, I was totally wrong. But second of all, I didn't think that that was a place for DeJuan at the time.
It's funny that you didn't realize or recognize that there was any salesmanship going on in your jobs as a bartender or a waiter.
Right.
Because obviously you were refining those skills, and there's plenty of salesmanship that goes into those roles, which is why so many of us like to recruit people, you know, from those roles into startup sales gigs, corporate sales gigs, and whatever.
Yeah, totally oblivious at the time, right? Like no understanding of intersection or you know, any relevance at all. Like, I mean, I knew I was making a lot of money waiting tables. I knew people liked me. I knew that um, I made more money in less time. Like, I mean, I knew all of the stuff that made me a good waiter, right? Or a good server or good bartender. I didn't know that they had any relevance outside of that restaurant whatsoever,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't on my radar at all.
Did you go, this is a personal question, hopefully you're okay with me asking it, but like, did you go backwards in income from when you said you were earning good money, like as a waiter and bartender, did you go backwards to get into sales? And what was that like?
I did. It was really interesting. That's a good question too, because you wouldn't think I did, but I did.
Yeah.
Because when I first got the job at Intuit, it was what they call flex time. I mean, I was given 16 hours a week. There were no benefits. It was almost like my buddy said, get your foot in the door and then you'll be able to kind of move around as you prove yourself. And so I just took a risk. But yeah, I definitely went backwards in terms of income. But if you've worked in restaurant lifestyle, you know that the income, no matter how high it is extremely relative because of how you live, right? Like, it's just like, okay, I know that if I need to pay my rent and I just, and I just had a good time over the weekend, or I went on a vacation or whatever I did, like I just pick up shifts. And so you kind of live on the basis of like, there's no real stability. And if you're not conscientious enough to save and plan well, then it doesn't really matter how much you make. And so moving into the Intuit role actually gave me an instant amount of stability because I was just getting paid every 2 weeks, right? And it was just
so in a way, it forced you to live more conservatively.
Yeah, more conservatively. I started to implement disciplines in areas of my life that I never had. I mean, it was really transformative in ways that I would have never imagined. And kind of, I'm 45 today. It's 20 something years ago. But it changed like the trajectory of like how I see life and how I see finances and money, right? Because money was like just a shift away, as opposed to something that's a little bit more stable, a little bit more calculated, and sort of constant and consistent.
So many people struggle with that decision, whether to change careers, change industries, go from an individual contributor to a leadership role, go from a leadership role where you can dial in your quota and you kind of know you're maxing out your on target earnings, to going to start something from scratch and kind of losing the commission part, even if you're picking up a bigger salary or title and equity along the way. How did you, I guess, what prompted your mindset to shift and change and be willing to go backwards? And how can you help others who maybe are at that same place recognize that even though you go 2 steps back, 1 step backward to go 2 steps forward type of thing?
Right. Yeah. The way I frame it is there has to come a time in life. This is for me. What happened is there comes a time in life where you start to look at the board differently, right? And I talk about this a lot in other places. It's like pinball, chess, and checkers, right? There's these different games. Checkers and chess have a really similar board, completely different initiatives, right? Like the sort of the accumulation of pieces in checkers is a big deal. It's less of a big deal in chess. And so like, as I started having kids, and as many kids as I have, like the way that I looked at the board had to continue to change. And so, and also like progress isn't always measured in forward movement, right? That's just life, right? Sometimes there's something, so you could progress to a place and realize that there was so much left on the table from a learning and development and growth perspective, that the only thing that makes sense is to actually move backwards into those roles so that you can get what it is that you understand you're missing or lacking, right? I still today have gaps that I know, would hinder me in any like advanced role or in a different position and things like that. Like I'm completely clear, and I don't worry about the optics as it relates to the position that I have. And I think that's if the people that I've spoken with who have gotten tripped up on the, having a reticence to move quote unquote backwards are people who are really aware of the optics of what that looks like. They care a lot about what people are going to think, how people are going to look at them, what it's going to say about their progress and all of this stuff like that. And I came to a place where that really doesn't matter to me, right? Providing for my family in the best way that I can does matter to me. And just growing responsibly and growing in some of the right ways also matters to me.
How do you get to that place mentally where the outside opinions you just kind of don't give a fuck about anymore?
Yeah.
I talk to people every single day. I'm sure you both do as well, who struggle with this,
Yeah. It's an ongoing struggle, Scott, to be honest with you. Like I can't say that I'm free and clear of having some concern about what people say about me. And especially as I'm seen as somewhat a representative of the companies that I'm involved with. And, so that's going to depend too. So you have somebody that's at a, pretty buttoned up company. That's not me at the moment. I'm just like if you have a person who's at a pretty buttoned up company, they're going to have a little bit more at stake, probably, at least psychologically, to pivoting to such an attitude that I think is really a free attitude. But for me, getting to it just was kind of a result of being surrounded by a lot of people who have already gotten there. Right. Like, so, the first conversation I had with you happened to be on that panel. I was inspired by your perspective, your take in the way that you move through some of these same issues. I have other friends. Mike Simmons is a friend of mine. Wow. Like just in engaging and interacting with him on a regular basis is another one of those people who is just like really not as concerned about the optics as many other people. So I have about 12 or 13 people that I'm in constant communication with who continue to check me as I say things that indicate I'm caring about what people think too much.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I don't know how you
that
get
happened,
to it.
DeJuan. When was the last time that happened? And you were like, oh, you know what? I probably should open my mind a little differently.
Man, last time I talked to Mike, for sure. And certainly another time, last time I talked to Jeff Bajort.
What kind of things are you saying that they're like, hey, whoa, DeJuan, like you go this way, be you.
Yeah, they're asking me questions, right? So like I'm having conversations with them. I won't divulge the whole conversation, but I literally called Mike Simmons on the phone one day and was like, just kind of laying out some things in the way that I was thinking about things. And he just asked me questions that eventually as I answered those questions, I realized these weren't my questions, right? These weren't things that I personally were actually concerned with, right? These were things that I was concerned with on behalf of someone else who I thought might be concerned with it. Right. And so he's asking me questions to get to the bottom of this. Like, so why is that important? Like, why does that matter? Right. Like tell me, okay, so what changes if you don't do X, Y, or Z? Right. Like, and I'm just like, oh, snap. Right. I'm realizing that I need to pop out of it because I feel like I'm under the radar. I'm under the gun. I feel like all eyes are on me for a variety of reasons that we could probably talk about. But at the end of the day, I realized that I was making decisions or trying to make decisions and trying to get Mike on board during that phone call with decisions that I was making that really wasn't about me. It was about other people outside of me. And just having that conversation and having someone to have that conversation with is extremely important. And I feel like I can't speak for everybody. I just feel like there's the people that I speak with and I mentor. It seems like they don't have enough people who are aware of that being a temptation in certain spaces and amongst certain personalities. So it's hard for them to get call outs on it, right? Yeah. It's hard for them to get call outs on it.
You had a great quote earlier. Now I'm gonna shank it, but it was something like something that progress doesn't always mean moving forward, or progress doesn't.
That's it. Yeah, I got it. That's the name of the episode. Yeah. Right there.
That quote is fantastic, but it brings me to a point because you're in enterprise sales, longer sales cycle, right? Do you apply that philosophy to your sellers when they're in pipeline mid-cycle, trying to work deals? Like, look, sometimes you got to go backwards and start all over. Sometimes you got to go backwards 1 or 2 steps. in order to then go forward. Does that philosophy bleed through to how you're coaching your sales reps right now?
Yeah, well, the good news is that, though my title is Senior Director of Global Sales, I'm an individual contributor. But it does bleed into, how I handle my own pipeline and how I speak and kind of interact with my BDR. It certainly bleeds into all of the coaching I've done in prior positions, because it's just true, right? Like if you believe that the only way forward is like a visible, palatable, obvious step forward, then you're in for a lot of heartache, right? Because that's not really, obviously that's a part of it. You want to be moving forward, but what does it mean to be moving forward with the wrong person?
Yeah.
What I'm saying? Like, does it matter if you had 5 meetings and it's the wrong person? So like, what else can work except moving backwards? In that scenario.
I gotta ask you this question. Why are you an IC? Like, you are way overqualified to be an IC. And
you've been a VP before too.
I know, right. But and a regional manager. So yeah.
So, and who's the boss we need to send this episode to make sure you do that?
You know what?
You gotta let us know what's the thought process there. Why are you in an IC role?
Yeah, it's really a desire, right? So there are multiple itches that I've scratched throughout my 20-year career, right? One of them is I was really interested early on, probably 2006-ish. I was interested in working European companies. So, what I ended up doing was I took a year stint as an enterprise sales rep for the UK and then also Australia at Intuit. Worked really weird hours in the middle of the night, experienced it for a year, loved it, itch, scratch, done. Leading a team of account executives that were distributed in the Bloomberg space. Did that for a year and a half, very successful, itch, scratch, done. I never got away from, nor could I ever get away from, a desire to, I don't know what I feel about the term, but hunt, research, execute a strategy, bring people in, have these discussions, close business, right? And so for a long time, I thought that I could find hybrid roles. So I did, I had a hybrid role at Intuit for a little bit. I had somewhat a hybrid role at Bloomberg before I moved into actual regional manager. I thought being a regional manager at Bloomberg, because of how my regional manager interacted with me, that I would be kind of half selling, half leading. You know what that means, right? You get into the leadership and all of a sudden it's admin work and emails and meeting. And it's just not.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I was always shocked.
So how much of it is, that's true? How much of it is, I just don't want to manage people?
No, I love serving people in that way, right? So my biggest, the biggest draw for me for any leadership role I've had was the ability to help people, right? And to impact people up close and personally, and to see that impact as they grow in their lives and their business and their families and all of those sorts of things. So that's still not something that I don't want to do. I just figure that there's a way to do it as an individual contributor as well, right? So like I have a BDR who I work directly with, who has aspirations and goals. My experience is going to be very invaluable to him. His experience in this space for longer than I've been in this space is going to be invaluable to me. So we make a really phenomenal team when it comes to like information sharing and motivating one another, right? And I can see the impact of the thing. Like just the other day, he called me and was like, look, I really appreciate you giving me this little nugget right here and kind of leading me in this direction because it resulted in this happening on this particular call. That to me is satisfying. So that itch is getting scratched. What's not happening is the other.
How much of it is also, you mentioned earlier you got kids. How much of it is a lifestyle? Like I know a lot of people who don't want to do management because of the extra hours, because they want to be with their kids or their family or their spouse or their significant other, whatever it is, right? Like that part of the decision for you.
I wish I could say it was, but to be honest, like the position I had at Bloomberg as a regional manager, I mean, I was working 40 hours a week. My team was doing extremely well. And so that wasn't it. That wasn't enough to hold me as a regional manager. I mean, highly successful team, highly successful region, trending toward the same the following year. And I still was hungry to get back into the game, right? I was still hungry to do something that might actually increase my work hours as opposed to decrease it. So it's not necessarily the lifestyle piece. That's something we have to manage as a family, regardless of the role that I take or have. But yeah, like I wish it was that easy where I could just be like, look, it's just I'm moving from being a manager of people. I had 11 AEs spread across, and if I move into this individual contributor role, I'm going to have a lot more time for my family. That's just not the case.
I need you to teach me. I need you to teach me about this mythical thing called the 40-hour work week. I don't understand this concept.
Yeah.
I'm trying to break Scott's bad habit of this. It's slowly happening.
This is my cheat code, right? So I say I work 40 hours a week because I'm counting 9 to 5, right? But I'm up at 5 in the morning, and I work out, and I pretty much get right on my laptop after that. But that doesn't count for me because my family sleep. When I count my work hours, I count hours that I'm stealing from my family. I see.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
That's pure Scott. Like for those who aren't listening, the wheels are turning. Like, how do I justify this to my wife? How is Janet going to handle this? Like,
you just got to be up before her.
I'm not stealing hours from you.
You just got to be up before her.
That happens in Scott's world. So let's go into the topic of minorities in tech or minorities in sales. Obviously you started in 2002. What does that feel like? What advice, I guess maybe the question is, for those who are considering moving into sales and they happen to be of some level of minority, right? It could even be women to a large extent.
Sure.
What advice do you give them and this is my bias, of that self-conscious piece of you as you move into this role? Because I assume that's there. And I don't know that it is, but that's my assumption. How do you get out of your own way to say, okay, I'm going to go do this? And it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be sales. It could be anything.
Yeah. So when you say self-conscious, you're thinking about the piece that's kind of criticizing yourself as maybe not able to do it, not going to be able to
that kind of thing. Like, are they going to look at me? Are they only going to hire me because I'm a woman, or because I'm African-American, or because I'm, of a certain ethnicity, or, any of those things, right? It could be gay, lesbian, right? It could be any of that stuff.
Sure. No, I laugh because I don't know anybody that's hired me only because I was an African-American. So I have no experience with personally, I have no experience with the reason we're going to give you a nod is because you're African-American. But I do think that that self-conscious piece is something that's going to be very, very difficult to shake, especially when you're in an environment where you may be in only. And you just need community. You don't just need community. Community is a big piece of what you need, because to this day, right? Like I posted the other day about a conversation I had with David Weiss via text that was just like, he said, "Are you helping people?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "If you're helping people, you're no imposter." Right? I still have these conversations where I'm wondering, like, is this right or real, or am I a fit for the role? Like, where this has always followed me, right? And the first thing I have a friend of mine who's a psychology professor, and I reached out to him one time. This is probably 3-4 years ago now. I reached out to him and said, "Man, tell me that there is a term for what I feel in all of these various spaces," right? So I started naming spaces for him, and I said, "This is what I feel in this space. This is how I feel in this space."
What are those spaces? Give people those ideas so we can.
Yeah, public speaking in certain arenas, right? So most of the public speaking I've done has been me speaking to a majority crowd, right? Teaching and training and coaching reps who at certain times were older than me, more seasoned than me, and maybe didn't look at the things that I was having to say in the same light that they did their previous manager. And
what are you feeling in those moments? Are you feeling I'm the only, or are you just feeling like, am I getting through? Like you sort of said you went to your friend and you said, "Hey, tell me about these feelings. Is there a word?" Well, what are those feelings that you felt in those situations?
Yeah, I just felt like I was carrying a bag for everybody who looks like me ever, right? So like one side of it is just like, if I mess this up, I don't know that another one of me is going to ever get the opportunity to do it. So there's a weight and a pressure to perform that I don't think exists for everyone. And so that was one of the feelings, right? The other feeling is that in the same vein, like, how many mistakes can I make, right? I've seen people make a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of grace for them, and there's the ability to bounce back with no problem. I don't feel during that conversation, I didn't feel that I had the level of confidence to say that if I do make an error here, I can bounce back easily, right? As opposed to reinforcing a stereotype that exists. And
And so what did
so,
what did your friend say? Is there a term?
yeah, he said I got two words for you, whistling Vivaldi. And I said, well, what in the earth is whistling Vivaldi? And he said, it's a book, go get it, read it or listen to it. And I did, and I was amazed that this is a phenomenon that it's not just about minorities or non-minorities. It's really about stereotype threat, wherever that stereotype might be found, right? And so slaying ghosts, right? Slaying dragons, slaying ghosts that are in these rooms that you walk into and you find yourself a part of, and then from there trying to balance, like, how do I appear and how do I show up in this space in a way that honors who I actually am and acknowledges that this threat is there, but maybe something that's not actually real in that time and space. So like, that book was huge for me to start putting terms, right, and started understanding that this is not a DeJuan thing, right? This is I'm living it, right? It's my lived experience, but there are people who have done long research on the existence of these phenomena, these feelings, and they are valid on one hand, and that's an important thing to note. One of the things that I tried not to do, not perfectly, but when someone presents feelings to me, like, I want to validate those feelings, like the feelings are real, and so that book validated my feelings. It didn't condone the way I reacted to them or responded to them, but it validated my feelings. And when I had my subsequent conversations with my friend, like, he validated my experience. He's a professor. He's a young black man professor. He was at SUNY New Paltz at the time. I don't know if I have to tell you about the demographics there, but he was in that position, right? And he was going for tenure and all of these types of things. He was presenting papers and research work. So he was experiencing it as well. And so we had an opportunity. This is where community comes in again. We had an opportunity to really talk through those things after I had read the book, and talk about ways to actually deal with that and cope with that in productive and not destructive ways. And that was extremely helpful for me.
That was awesome. Like, I literally wrote down that book. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was saying, DeJuan, you're a part of a number of different communities online.
Yes, gotta be.
Why don't you talk about the reasons why? I mean, you said you gotta be. Talk about the reasons why, and then if you can, you don't have to name names you don't want to, but like, what makes some of them work better than others?
Yeah, good question. I find that I have to be a part of these types of communities because I'm learning over time. It's taken me probably 15 years to learn that some of the stuff I say is important to some people, right? That some of the stuff I say is actually helpful, uniquely. And I want to be able to help as many people as I can. And so sort of being in these different communities gives me an opportunity to peer in. Sometimes I'm lurking. I'll see a question. Maybe I'll reach out to somebody by a DM or something like that and start a conversation and see if I can help. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is I too need the help, right? So I need the help in ways that there's only certain people who are going to understand clearly when I get on the phone and I sound like I'm about to cry because I'm just so much stress and pressure that is on me, not from the work that I'm doing necessarily or the company I'm with necessarily, but just because of who I am and the space I occupy and what that means for the pressure and the stress that I feel. Not everyone can hold that conversation. So some of my work in these communities is identifying who might be able to hold that conversation so we can actually jive together. And then I build new communities of people that I just get on the phone with and have those conversations and vent and things like that. Now, David Weiss has started a podcast that's centered on that because it is a prevalent problem. But so that's a part of it. And then the other part is just knowledge share, man. I talked about my gaps earlier. and the fact that at 45 I still have a lot. The best way to fill it is to find people who have what I have as a gap as a strength, and vice versa, so that we can feed off of each other and help each other to grow. Iron sharpens iron, so I try to be in the presence of as many irons as possible.
Now, what makes some of these communities more powerful or more successful, though? Assuming, I'm going to assume there's some iron in each community, but not every community, makes the same impact on you, I find, or
that's right.
You to make the same impact on others. So I'm curious, because there's, this is almost like the year of the micro community in a way. Well, not every micro community is made equal.
You got that right.
What I've seen. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts there.
I do. What I'm looking for in a community that I find will be most impactful to me personally is I need to see evidence of people being people, right? There's some communities that I have dabbled in, and it's just a lot of
you get the feeling that it's just like all chatter, no substance.
It's just a big corporate thing, right? Like it's like being in a, for me, that the experience that I'm referring to and thinking of is just like, it was just like coming to another meeting. You know what I mean? It was almost like coming to another corporate event or a corporate meeting where everyone had an idea of what would make them look best. Yeah. And it was just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people projecting that. And I so that's not that useful for me. I need to first see, because I'm testing the water. Like I'm like, I want to know what people are actually feeling and thinking, and I know how this works, right? So I know that sometimes somebody comes out and they say, hey, I feel inept in my role. And then on the basis of that, you get a couple people who say, yeah, I've been there. I know what you mean. This is how I overcame it. I'm kind of looking for the community where somebody says, I feel inept in my role, and people just say, I do too. Without just like, and I call that, the term that I use for that is just like naked account, like naked honesty, right? Like where because I hear a lot of transparency that is shaded, right? Like, so it's like, yeah, I felt inadequate in my role before, and these are the steps I took, with no conclusion. Okay, did those steps actually fix it, or did those steps just position you to better deal with it? Like what happened? So where are you today? Is it fixed? Are you done? Because if that's the case, like you probably can't stomach me, right? And I may not be able to stomach you.
I hear you.
It feels like all these communities are like apps on our phone. Like we have so many we can belong to, and then there's a whole ton. Like I bet I have 100 apps on my phone that I ignore, but I also haven't deleted them. Right? That's what it seems like to me.
This is the difference between me and you, Richard. I have like 25 apps on my phone. If I don't use it, it's not on my phone. It's gone.
That is a whole episode, dude, because I don't know anybody like you.
That's the level of discipline I need to get to.
DeJuan, I hear you talk about that reply, if you will, or that explanation where somebody says, yeah, I felt this way too. I felt like an imposter too. Here's what I did.
Yeah.
I hear you say that, and all I could think of is that's how that particular individual moved through that bout with imposter syndrome.
Right.
Now they're fighting a new bout. Because I don't know that it ever goes away. Like I had doubt as a rep. I had doubt as a manager. I had doubt as a VP. I had doubt as an entrepreneur. It never really goes away. It's like, okay, this is what I did to move through that particular bout. I tried to do it again the next time, and it didn't work as well. And I had to find some new thing.
Yeah.
So I like that. You look for the people who just say, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Like, man, I don't have all the answers either. I'm all screwed up as well.
Yeah, because it's in that way. The way my wife frames it, right, is like if you can't sit with me in what's hurting, like sit with me in the pain and the recognition of what's off, right? Then how can we be human together? I mean, that's my wife's words, and I'm like, that applies everywhere, right? Like we can't really be human together if every time I bring up something that is a stressor or bothersome to me, you just have an immediate fix.
Yeah.
Right? That's not the way. That's not the way to build camaraderie. A layer of transparency that's going to be required for us both to grow and actually benefit from one another, because it ends up being the one who always has the fix is always seated above the one who needs the fix. When we both need the fix, one of us is acknowledging it and one of us is not. Yeah. And that type of relationship will always be seen as a hierarchy as opposed to a side-to-side a growth fest, if you will. So I have some of those relationships. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think you need a variety of types of relationships. Some of them are just going to be knowledge sharing. Some of them will be sharpening in a skill set for a particular role. But I really, really enjoy the relationships that I have where I can say, I'm struggling here, and someone can actually meet me there and I'm not looking for sympathy, as it were. Like, I'm not looking for somebody to be like, oh, poor you, but just like, can you tell me how you can relate to this? And then let's talk through it together. In the midst of that, we'll probably help each other. But ultimately, like, I just, transparency is something I see it thrown around all over the interwebs, like transparency this and transparency that and transparency that. And you ask somebody, how you doing this week? And they're just like, phenomenal. Like, or, how you been this quarter? Like, how's this quarter going for you? Man, I can't complain. There's nothing to complain about. I mean, I'm not asking you to complain, but I mean, we all live in the same world, right? Like, it's been hard. For a number of reasons. Like, if you can't say it's been hard, what else can't you say? Anyway.
I agree. I kind of call it meeting people in their own headspace, right? And it 100% goes to that emotional connection, right? Like, where, for me, it's trying to remember to ask people, well, how can I help you? Hey, you're having a great quarter. Good. Well, how can I help you? How can I help you make it better? Right. And I think it's a really good question. Morgan Ingram actually taught it to me, because I asked him, I said, with everything going on with social justice, right? Like, turn around and ask, a Black person, how are you doing? It's kind of like, I should know how I'm doing. I don't need to ask that. I said, what should I say? Right. If I want to be supportive, he said, how can you help? And it was interesting because it really clicked for me. And I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense.
And I have the opposite problem. Every time Richard asks me how I'm doing, I'm just like, I'll fucking barely survive, dude.
I already know how you're doing.
All around me, everything's gonna disappear in the next 45 minutes.
But Scott, in fairness, you're willing to answer the question pretty realistically. Like, I can ask you that, and our relationship is deep enough that you'll be like, dude, this is what's wrong. This is what's wrong, right? I don't think
here's one of the things that when I was leading the team, I one of the first things I said to my team when we met was like, I know that you're accustomed to having leadership, that when you go to the leadership and you have some things to get off your chest and you want to vent and things like that, you fear risking your brand to do that. And the first thing I want to tell you is that your brand is on the basis of that, like you expressing what you actually feel and how things are actually going. Your brand is never in danger with me. What I want to do is I want you to come to me with that stuff. You can cuss me out. You can do whatever you want to do. But at the end of that call, I'm going to ask you, what would you like to see done? Or what obstacle would you like to see moved? And then I'm going to help you frame the ask to the right people so that your brand is protected, right? So you come to me and do all of the stuff that would normally ruin your brand. And then we're going to frame it properly so that you can actually get some results from toward what you actually want, right? And that, I had people come to me and just be like, that changed their feeling about the work, right? Because they no longer had like this horseshoe over them, or this idea that at any moment they were going to be ruined in the eyes of the leadership of the organization. And like that's
that sounds like me trying to get you to use Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on. You see me?
I see you, and it's good, and it's good, and it's good.
Yeah, that was huge. That was a huge impact. I was like, you know what? He's right. Let me go out here and do it.
DeJuan's out there on Twitter now talking all sorts of things, including how bad he is at golf and how he's This is the content that I'm here for from the people I know and respect.
Yeah, I appreciate that nudge.
I got to pull us out because we're like, this has been a fabulous episode, because you just, like, I was texting Scott, like, there's so many good nuggets in here for this episode, and I got a ton of great notes for us, but we're actually at the end, unfortunately.
It went quick.
It did. We're going to ask you one last question, but first I want to just, remind everybody of our sponsors, of Find Them, Lead 411, Perception Predict, Gong, and of course, Vidyard, our newest sponsor in November and December. So our final question for you is, how can we help you? Is there a cause you're out there you want to talk about, mention? Is there business advice you want to ask us? We sort of turn it over to you now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And this is going to be the first time I ever mention this now that you asked that question. There's a cause that I'm really, really passionate about, and that's like equity in education. And to that end, I'm a board member of a school that's launching next year here in Richmond, Virginia. If you don't know much about Richmond, Virginia, obviously we're in the former home of the former capital of the Confederacy. A lot of the laws and legislation that prevented Black mobility within the community they originated here in Richmond, Virginia. And so, the redlining and all of the things that impacted educational spaces and the way education is meted out here remain, right? So there's still a big, big chasm between the haves and the have-nots as it relates to education in Richmond. And so the school is called Imago Dei Neighborhood School. And, we are looking for people. You don't have to be in Richmond to be passionate about education, equity in education, starting at a young age. We're looking at starting at like pre-K through like second grade, because we believe that that's the space where the messages that the kids internalize get solidified at that early age. And so our desire and goal with the school is to provide a place where kids can come and hear truth about like who they are and the value that they have as individuals, and the fact that there's a large world out there and they can actually have access to it partially through education. And so that's a big deal for me right now. And we're in the midst of like this fundraising activity to make sure that we can get it launched, because it's deeply and desperately needed here in the city of Richmond. And so I'm happy to provide a link to the school.
What is it? Go ahead and tell people. What is the link?
Yeah.
We'll put it in the episode.
Yeah, it's the name of the school is Imago Dei. I wasn't prepared for this question, but let me make sure I can give you the right URL. It is imagodayrichmond.org.
Modeldayrichmond.org.
No, Imago Dei. So IMAGODEI Richmond.org. And ultimately this
one more time for folks.
Yeah, Imago Dei. IMAGODEI Richmond.org. And this is just for anybody that's passionate about education and seeing equity in education and people having access to the levels of education that you normally have to pay a lot of money for and blocks people out. This is one of those efforts to bring some equity to that space here in the city.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for being involved with that, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I got 6 kids, and I've seen like how hard it is, to entrust them to a particular school and feel confident that the lessons that they're getting and the messages that are echoing in their mind are messages of not just positivity, but again, truth. Like, you are not what what the imagery and what the media and what these different pundits have said you are. Like, you are more than that, based on just who you are, right? Your person, your personhood. So
That's awesome, man. Thank you for being inspiring too, and starting your career and helping others, whether it's at a management level, an individual level, and then also seeking out your own education, right? Like I think that's sometimes paying it forward is figuring out your own shit, right?
Yeah.
And you can pay it forward.
That's real.
So
Yeah.
we really appreciate it, Juan. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate
Good to
it.
see you again, man.
It was good. Yeah, likewise.